See, we're learning things every day about our fine county, our beautiful rural county, our rural agricultural with plenty of livestock county. Remember it? The stories of James Herriot, the rural vet of Yorkshire, and the pressures that he was under from time to time. Now, you might have thought that was a work of fiction, delightful though it was. How close was it to accuracy? Well, I'm delighted to be joined on the programme by Katie Kershaw, who is the equine vet at Ryder-Davies, on the subject of various things veterinary surgeon-wise. Katie, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, James. I love the sound of your kind words on your fridge door. I think that sounds like an excellent idea.
You know what? Adults, when does that stop happening? Because, all the grandchildren's paintings, however good or bad they are, get on the fridge door. I struggle to make the fridge door. I see it as a pat on the back, and I think that should continue.
I agree. We have a window in the office, and all of our lovely thank you cards go up on there for full display to all of the vets.
Yeah, exactly. There's no harm in it at all. We alluded there, of course, to that old TV show, All Creatures Great and Small, and we were bemused on occasion, enthralled on others as to the work of the rural vet. So I'm delighted to be able to talk to an actual rural veterinary surgeon on life in a county like Suffolk, Katie. Presumably it's not without its pressures.
No, and I think that actually, I don't know if you have watched the latest series of James Herriot that Channel 5 have been doing, but I think it's doing a really lovely job of portraying some of the pressures that we face. Yeah. Because as much as it's an idealistic job, it's certainly the one that I've wanted to do since I was tiny, and I'm now in my mid-30s. It definitely comes with pressures that you don't realise. And I think one of the biggest ones is the pressure we put on ourselves to save animals. Yeah. Because that's what we really want to do, is we want to make that big difference. We want to make sure that everything's okay. And obviously that's not always that straightforward in this day and age.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, not only do you have the inbuilt internal desire to save animals, but of course, any saving you do presumably comes with a cost to the animal owner. And there's this weighing up, this balance to be struck.
Absolutely. And I think that there is a view now that you can see some of the main amazing things that can be done, often for vast amounts of money on some of the TV programs out there these days. And that's just not the reality for the majority of people who own animals. So it really is a balancing act between doing the best for the animal, but while working in the financial constraints of the client. And that may be a commercial constraint because you're dealing with a farm animal or a business, or it may be a individual constraint of an individual owner, with or without insurance, because that isn't simple as it is. So no, it is a huge balancing act between best for the animal and best for the owner.
Well, let's look at some of the rumours that are abound, some of the perceptions that folk may have about rural life. And when it comes to the farm, the animals are just chattels, and if you can't save them for a couple of quid, then you destroy them. That's not really how farmers see their livestock.
No, and I think that animals, I don't think people probably appreciate the vast cost of buying some of these farm animals. And so, no, actually, a reasonable amount of money and time goes into saving them. And I think a lot of farmers would be pretty upset to hear, oh, you just shoot it if it's no good. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it is absolutely in the animal's best interest to call it a day sooner rather than later, rather than putting them through any suffering that they don't understand. Yeah. But no, there is a lot that can be done. And it's always that question of, just because I can doesn't mean I should. But generally, that's it's an act between kind of the farmer or the clients and the vet as to how much we put that animal through.
All right. Perception number 2, 7 years of training, more than a GP. Is that true, Katie?
So the actual vet course is 5 years. A lot of people do 6 because they do an extra degree in the middle of it, because ultimately we're veterinary scientists at the end of the day rather than just vets. I mean, when you qualify as a vet, when you are a baby vet, having come out of university for the first time, you are technically allowed to do whatever you like. Yeah. Now, ultimately, they go into practice and they are heavily supported by a brilliant team of people around them. So they do have a lot of support. But 5 years plus a year on certain occasions, but certainly not quite as many as my GP friends.
Yeah. Okay. And please don't hate me for this one. I'm gonna say it, then put my tin hat on and run away. Vets profiteer out of the suffering of animals.
Yes, this is a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would say probably the majority of the time that actually we practice as a business make more money out of the preventative healthcare. We don't really want to see animals suffering because we don't want to have to try and fix them. We want them to be well in the first place. Yeah. And so a huge amount of our time goes into preventative healthcare, whether that's vaccination or worming or education of clients, that type of thing. And so, like we're going back to in the first place, I was 7, 8 when I sat there at school going, I only ever want to be a vet. And ultimately, my interest at the end of the day is everyone having healthy animals, and especially in my world with horses. Yeah. I want my clients to do well. I want them to be able to compete. I want them to be able to ride. And actually, all of those things aren't possible if they're poorly. So no, very much a case of trying to keep everything as healthy as possible to keep everybody as happy as possible.
Do you think it might be the case that we are so used to what many would call free healthcare? I know that we pay our tax and all of that, but essentially free healthcare. So when it comes to animals and the costs that are associated with caring for them, it's a bit of a shock to us because we don't even pay that for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think there's big studies that have gone into this and about people's perceptions of the UK veterinary industry. And when you talk to people in countries where they have to pay their own healthcare, they have a very different perception of what is a genuine cost. And I think you have to remember that when you're walking into that vet practice, you may only be seeing one person for 10, 15 minutes. But to allow that to happen is because you've paid a reception team, you have paid an admin team, you have got vet nurses, very highly qualified vet nurses at the back of the practice doing that work. You've got someone who administers the drugs and makes sure that's all kept safe. And there's a huge amount of work behind the scenes that goes into that one payment that you're making. And it's really hard, actually, I think, for clients to understand the amount of the pressure that goes into that one payment that they're making is certainly not the same as, the amount that you'd maybe find it for on the internet.
But it must be, though, a stress on you when somebody says, you really would rather we just let the animal die than do it for nothing. And I guess you're thinking, part of you is thinking, well, I'd love to be able to do it. That's what I train for. That's what I've always wanted to do. But it can't be free.
No. And I think this is the problem, is that we are ultimately businesses at the end of the day, where you've had people who have gone through a huge amount of training. And as vets, we don't get paid anywhere near as much as I suspect people believe that we do. The average salary is significantly lower than a doctor or a dentist or something like that. And I think the one thing that we need to think about is the fact that where we are repeatedly saying that we're not wanting to make money, the language used, especially in some of the media stuff recently, the last week, I had a quick Google, we've got greedy vets, profit hungry vets. That's from one newspaper in a 24-hour period. Yeah. And that's going back to the vet who is trying their best to fix something, often with limited financial ability, and putting a huge amount of time and effort in, and that can be very emotionally challenging for the vet. Yeah,
that's got to be heartbreaking. What is the solution? And presumably it's insurance, is it? I mean, it's using the healthcare model of many other countries with humans. It is the insurance thing.
Yeah, and I think that there is a huge benefit to insurance, especially in the small animal industry. The equine one is slightly more challenging to deal with, but I think, this is maybe going to make me sound slightly unpopular, but unfortunately, animals are a little bit of a luxury, especially the equine side of them.
Sure.
Yes, there are things available like insurance companies and things like that, which allow you to help pay for these things over a period of time. But we do have to understand that the price you pay for your animal when you first get it, you do then need to factor in the cost of neutering and the cost of vaccination and that type of thing, which, whether it's a small or a large animal, can be quite expensive. And those things aren't going to be covered by insurance.
No, exactly. What do you think is behind the slight problem you're seeing then in your industry, the retention of vets, where people are moving away from the industry?
Well, I think, we've already touched on a few places where if you spent a lot of time and energy into trying to fix something, and then all you get in return is a very large complaint, and often that's a complaint that goes quite far. The US kind of thing of suing vets is definitely coming to the UK, and that can be very emotionally challenging for people.
Oh wow!
We then also have the fact that we've had Brexit and COVID in the meantime, so we've lost a lot of European vets because of the Brexit regulations, and we also had a lot of people who have gone, do you know what, I don't really need to tolerate this anymore. And when all you really want to do is try and work with the animals, sometimes that the degree of emotional involvement of the animals, you get a compassion fatigue, which unfortunately is just too much for some people to cope with. And you know, in the worst extent, we know that we have a 3 to 4 times more higher suicide rate in the UK vet population than in the general population.
Oh my goodness me, really? So there is huge mental health pressures, clearly.
Absolutely that. And I think so some people are kind of, so to speak, jumping ship before they get to that point and don't want to be in the industry anymore. And other people are persevering through. And unfortunately, despite the fact that there's increasing amount of awareness and support out there, sometimes it's just too much. And, you know, certainly what we can't say is we can't oversimplify the reason it's happening. But I think we've said there's so many different things already that have factored into the fact that we've said that the vets are struggling a little bit with this. And one of the end results for the clients, unfortunately, is going to be the fact that there's going to be places in the country, or there already are places in the country where you can't get a vet anymore.
Yeah. Like dentists, basically.
Absolutely, like dentists, absolutely the same. Yeah. And so you have these parts of the country where you're completely unable to register for a vet. And so I'd say to people, you know, just double check before you get that new animal that you can actually register it, that your practice hasn't closed its books. And in the rural sense that we were just discussing before, there are whole parts of the UK where you can't get a farm animal vet anymore because there just aren't any. So it's a big change, and I think we need to be a little bit aware of it.
Huge worry for a rural community, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we still do our best to do our bit, but, you know, in Suffolk, we have a limit of the number of farm animals, and therefore the likelihood of it, you know, the amount of money that can be made, the business ability, all that type of thing is a little bit challenging. And people, you know, wanting to move, because a lot of people want to live around cities, you know, that's where partners' jobs are and things. So trying to get people to move into the countryside. And I don't think anyone realises how lovely Suffolk is until they come here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do want to ask you this. You hear it said sometimes that nurses build up not a sort of a hardness, if you will, but they sort of build up methods in which they're able to do their job. I mean, do you as a vet have to build that up as well? Because I don't know how you do it. If every animal was fixable, then fine. But they're not. We know they're not. And sometimes tough decisions have to be made. And that would kill me. Do you have to build up a sort of a distance from the pets, the animals?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think fortunately for me in my large animal world, I have slightly fewer of them. But you think some of my small animal colleagues will be, say, having a puppy consult where everybody is very excited and they've got a brand new puppy. And then the next one is saying goodbye to that very gorgeous and very well-loved 14-year-old Labrador, followed by another appointment to deal with something else. And I think you have to be able to deal with the emotion at the time and then close it off for a little bit. And it's where some of that compassion fatigue comes, because if there's a limit, even in people who have built up their tolerance, so to speak, there is a limit of how much tolerance you can inflict on your brain. But no, there is definitely a side of it where we have to be sensible and we have to be strong for the people that we are dealing with and for the animals we're dealing with. But we just then also obviously have to have our own little coping mechanism afterwards, otherwise it breaks down. Yeah,
well, absolutely. You specialise, of course, in horses. You're an equine vet. But like all species, I mean, nurses have it easy. They're able to communicate with people and find out what's wrong. You don't have that luxury.
I don't know if easy. I think I debated being a doctor for about 6 months when I was 17 and realised how much you have to talk to people.
Yeah, sometimes that's a downside. Yeah.
I think we ultimately, our communication has to be done via the clients. So a huge amount of our skill as a vet is in your is actually very little of it is spent in touching the animal. It's really in getting that history and getting that communication from the owner, from the person who knows their animal best. And so, yes, it is a challenge that the animal can't tell you exactly where it hurts. But yes, we do have to spend a huge amount of time talking to people, trying to work out what's going on.
I could talk to you for some considerable time, but we have to leave it there because for various reasons. But I do.
I could talk all day, don't you? Well,
absolutely. And it's fascinating. And we'd love to speak to you again on a whole range of subjects. But I do want you to take this away. And I suspect it's the case with many people. But my own personal story is that about 6 months ago, my little dog, playing with the cat, broke her back. And by all accounts, she couldn't move. She couldn't. It was looking very much like, it was the end of the road for this 3-year-old dog. Oh, but no, we took her to a specialist vet. And she is 6 months later now back to normal, running around, playing with the cat, and being just the dog she once was. And I'd have paid 10 times the amount it cost to have seen that. And that, to me, is hero stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that level of gratitude, if anybody listening has a story where they are just really grateful for the work that their vet has done, tell them. We often focus on the bad things, but actually, that thank you wall full of cards or that little email to say thank you for what we've done is hugely appreciated by everyone. And it's a lovely story. So thank you. And it sounds to me like there's a few more of those that may be needed the next time you're in the service of a vet. My thanks to Katie Kershaw. Absolutely fascinating, who is actually an equine vet, but rural vets, it's a similar kind of pressure across the board. Katie, thank you so much for your time today. Great speaking to you. You're very welcome. Thank you for listening.